so much. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Galvin, sir.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair, I want to again thank Dr. Dotris and his team for this very comprehensive, detailed framework for professional development this summer. Through the chair, I have a question. However, the fulcrum of the work that the district, the schools, this board, our teachers have to do are all predicated on leadership. So at the end of the day, whether it's a session on safety and security, data analysis and benchmarking, community and family engagement, pedagogy delivery, whatever those elements are relative to school operations, if you will, come back to the notion and the reality and the value and the importance and the potential impact of instructional leadership. This is not a new narrative for me, obviously. I've had this conversation over the past year or so, and obviously this has been of significant interest to me for almost 25 years, relative to not simply being a former principal, but also being one who's researched that impact, the nexus between instructional leadership, school operations, and educational outcomes. I come, Madam Chair, through a time frame, and we had the pleasure today of honoring, and I was regretfully absent because of a prior commitment, honoring a true champion, a true trailblazer in the person of Octavio Viziedo, who was superintendent. I want to thank my colleague Rojas for that recognition, and again, I have called him personally to indicate that I would be absent. But Dr. Bendross-Mendengal, you remember during that time, they had an office that was called OIL, the Office of Instructional Leadership. That was the office. And that office had a significant, deliberate, unapologetic, targeted emphasis on developing instructional leaders at the school site. That was a direct response, obviously, through the changing narrative around what school leaders had to do. The antiquated expectation, the antiquated practice of principals being managers had quickly evolved post-1983, when it was determined that the most significant determining factor in a school overall, teachers are critically important, but guess what? Teachers have to be supported. Teachers have to be protected. Teachers have to have the resources given to them. And in many cases, instruction has to be monitored. So all of those elements trace back to instructional leadership. So I guess I set the stage for my question relative to both Summer 305, but also post-Summer 305, relative to some of the opportunities, some of the OFIs, some of the emphasis on enhancing, strengthening, and bolstening instructional leadership in our schools with a degree of intentionality. So through the chair, can someone speak to that, either during the summer, post-summer, and what are some of the plans relative to that? Through the chair. Oh.
Yes,
Dr. Gallant?
Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, Dr. Gallant, 100%. We call that scaled leadership development. Throughout the entire year, we do not do instructional leadership only in the summer. We've been doing this for years. In the summer, we reinforce instructional leadership via some of the workshops, via the instructional team that is set up to develop school improvement planning and get ready for their leading forward. But throughout the entire year, it's no longer about principal meetings. It is about the first 2.5 hours of the principal meetings that should be devoted, and this was being done prior to my arrival here, that are being devoted to what professional development for leaders are. And there are a host of months that are targeted towards content and instruction. And of course, then there are some other months that are adjusted based to other needs. So the principal bench, the assistant principal bench, the induction for principals and the induction for assistant principals are heavily infused with instructional leadership. Third-year principals go to FIU for Center of Excellence, and that is infused with instructional leadership. So please be assured that the instructional leadership component is embedded throughout the entire process and not only sporadically or in the summer. And in our conversations with Dr. Pace, one of the reasons that we decided to divide the school operations umbrella into one that focuses more on schools and the other one, our chief operating officer, that will be taking more of the district operations. If you see the language, we wanted to make sure that school operations now becomes the office of school leadership and performance, because it's all about school leadership, right? It's about the region superintendent, the region directors supporting and building instructional leaders across the board. So that is one of the emphasis that we are continuing to do. But that focus of instructional leadership, which I can tell you when it started, back when we started our programs. It was approximately 5 years ago with the University of Washington, and what we did with them with the framework of effective instruction, how leaders view instruction, what the look-fors are. That has been a pivotal point of what we continue to do.
Thank you. Follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I want to thank you for that, Dr. Dodres, and I'm glad you did point out that within the context of your reorganization, you have made an intentional effort to delineate the value, the importance, and actually segregate this whole notion and obligation to instructional leadership. So I want to commend you for that. One of the things that has come out with respect to the support is that there was a dearth of support. So when you start talking about new principals, new administrators, we talked about mentoring. And we've had a conversation about that with Dr. Baglow's office. I had the likes of Mr. Shirley Shatteen, the late Jesse Stinson, and the Honorable Dr. Dorothy Bendross Mendengal to be real up close and personal mentors and give me examples of what instructional leadership should look like. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Marie Harrison and Cecilia Hunter, and it goes on and on. So everybody brought something to the table. Marie Harrison, you know what she brought to the table, details. Cecilia Hunter, unapologetic, no nonsense, accountability. Shirley Shatteen, being able to be charismatic, engaging, and inspire people to lead. And we all know the narrative of Dr. Dorothy Bendross Mendengal: parental accountability, community engagement, elevating the least, the last, and the lost. Those are different elements and ingredients that came into an amalgamation of my leadership style and approaches. So it's not restricted to things that happen in the school just with a classroom. I'm looking at all of those issues. When we start talking about school safety, there's a nexus between instructional leadership and school safety. When I was here in the district, we had a training that was called "It Did Not Have to Happen." That was relative to practices that we have to implement in schools to avoid conflict, to avoid student issues and teacher issues, where the best example we give, Ms. Baez-Geller, is the student that has the hat on and the teacher that reaches to grab the hat, and that results in a conflict. The student moves the hand, now you have an issue of an assault, and it becomes one of those things that didn't have to happen. So when we look at data, when we look at curriculum, when we look at pedagogy, we're looking at cafeteria, we're looking at cleanliness, we're looking at responsive time to parents, we're looking at all of those things, community engagement, and all of those things go into what we call the look-fors and what we want in all of our schools and our principals. So I will be looking for, what does that look like? What is the blueprint of expectation from Florida City to County Line Road that we should expect. Everybody's at a different level of performance. Everybody's at a different level of output. But there's a certain bar of expectation that should happen in Ms. Frogger's district. It should happen in Ms. Hampton's district. These are the expectations that we have in our schools with our principals, and that we don't have that leadership disparity that very often manifests itself in certain schools and in certain communities, in certain zip codes. And it's not about the will set, it's about the skill set. So we have a whole lot of willing people, but we have to develop their skill set. And that skill development, Dr. Dotris, obviously has to be along a continuum of intentionality. A continuum of intentionality, not a meeting, not a session, but a continuum of intentionality. And we did have an opportunity last year to find some gaps. And as we move forward prospectively, that's going to be something that I think is going to be critically important. Because I'll close by saying this, Madam Chair, after the resources dry up, after the resources run against that wall of scarcity, the most important resource that people can have is knowledge. And that's what we want to have sustained in our schools in the capacity of our school leaders. So you all know I had an item that I never brought around that particular issue because you all were very responsive to that. But as we plan for next year, those are some of the elements that I think are going to be critically important moving forward. And universities are great, don't get me wrong. I love, you mentioned FIU, I got 2 degrees from there. But at the end of the day, that internal capacity and support is going to have to be sustained internally with support. Thank you.
Madam
Thank
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Superintendent.
And in my way, and Dr. Gallen, what I want to assure you, so absolutely, because I just mentioned certain components, but on the ground, right, on the ground, we have to be consistent. And something that we've been doing also are walkthroughs, instructional walkthroughs with principals walking together, looking at instruction and getting feedback from what could be better, what could be improved. So it is, I just don't want the board to have the impression that is just sit and get, but it is professional development that is also applied, where principals and assistant principals go and conduct instructional rounds and learn from what they're seeing in the actual practice. So maybe what we'll do is provide a chart or a visual so that we capture all the different elements, Dr. Baglos, that we're doing in terms of developing the strong instructional leaders that we have. What we do in year 1, what we do in year 2, what we do in year 3, scale leadership throughout the entire year, and then also the instructional walkthroughs that we've been doing for several years now. And even in the summer, we do, don't like the name, but that's what it was called, we do calibration of evaluation of instructional personnel. So those are all different components, and I think what I am sensing is a need for us to be descriptive and really lay it out so you know how intentional our approach is and what we will do. One area that I must mention that we have to strengthen, and we've been talking about it, is on the coaching side, right? For new principals in particular. We do have a core set of coaches, and we're looking at how to standardize that coaching approach as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Dr. Dotris. Thank you so much. I'll leave with this one statement: is what they see is what they'll be. So people have to see the examples of what we're looking for. So I'm glad to hear that and look forward to further discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Dotris.